the West Bridgewater Conservation Meeting for Tuesday, December 19th, 2023, 6:30 PM at McDonald Brown Conference Room is now open. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for December 5th.
And I'm going to make a disclosure. For this meeting, I am actually also a member of the Conservation Commission, as well as their agent. I normally do not act in that capacity, but I have been appointed, and tonight, because for a quorum, we have one remote participant, we have Lee as chair, and I will be the third member. So I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Steve, second?
Steve, can you hear us?
Steve, can you hear us? Steve, can you hear us?
We just go into the chat.
He's
Yeah,
speaking.
okay. Steve, can you hear us now? Okay. Want to do that again? Call it.
No, I'll entertain the motion to approve the minutes for December 5th.
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Yep, Steve seconds.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. There's a new public hearing, so I'll write that into the minutes. Under the West Bridgewater Conservation Phase Stormwater Management and Soil Erosion Control Bylaw and the West Bridgewater Comprehensive Stormwater Management Regulations, the Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on December 19th, 2023 at 6:30 PM in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street on general storm water permit application at 48 Vital Ave for proposed site development for a single-family home with 20,200 square feet of land disturbance. Okay.
Okay, you should be able to, yep, you should be able to share the screen.
All right, I'll do that right now. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep,
All right. Good evening. My name is Deshai Tony. I'm an engineer with MBL Land Development and Permitting. I'm here for you tonight on behalf of our applicant for full stormwater permit application for the property at 48 Vital Ave. This is existing vacant lot and proposing the construction of a single family bedroom house with a septic system, site grading, access, and utilities. And as part of our project and going back to the town, there were some concerns from the abutters in the town regarding the stormwater treatment at this site. So in order to alleviate those concerns, we prepared these plans and the application that we submitted a few weeks ago. So our site, grading wise, we're not proposing to send any runoff into the road by the lab. We're going to capture all of the runoff generated by our site, both from the roofs. We're proposing subsurface drainage chambers in the back of the site, and we're also proposing a mini stormwater detention area that's going to hopefully capture the runoff that runs off of our site from the driveway, from the rest of the yard into a little basin that will infiltrate some of the runoff before it goes into the spillway. And our hope for doing that is that we alleviate concerns, because there have been some issues with heavy rainfall events at the site, just due to the nature of the existing grading topography. So to do that, propose this design, we must propose erosion control controls to prevent any runoff from going off site, sediment, debris, anything like that. So we a filterment, silt fence barrier, which had been installed if necessary. We did not be able to do that before we start construction again. And also propose construction entrance during site construction, so any trucks pulling in and out of the site on track 7 to vital. But we also propose this will stop pilot and common wash up the vehicle in case it's needed during construction. So with those measures, we hope that the commission's concerns and the abutters' concerns in regards to the site and at the end of construction to implement these controls and their we believe we have a working drainage design and will send as much runoff as possible off site, and any runoff that is sent off site we capture detentions. Okay. So, and you have
The abutters' concerns are with the runoff that's actually happening now off of the property. Once this basin is completed, will there be stormwater runoff continuing after that, or once it's loomed and seeded, it will be all in the basin at the bottom?
after it's loaned and seeded, in theory, there will be very minimal runoff occurring. In a 100-year storm event, we had some very heavy rainfall early this week. There is bound to be some runoff that just isn't able to be contained in this little basin, but it is going to help the existing state of the site. I'll zoom into the existing condos just so you guys can get an idea of what the site looks like now. This low point right here, this is right into the water's chain of events that they've been in touch with us in the town, and we've tried our best to alleviate their concern regarding this. So right now, this existing runoff all comes down to this low point right here at this offsite. So we can't really make any changes to the water's property grading wise, but with the implementation of this basin, it should greatly help, especially when it's grassed and seeded, to infiltrate some of the runoff. So it's not sending all the runoff just untreated, infiltrating. So we can't say for certain that nothing will be coming off site, but we've done our best to make sure that as little as possible.
Is this spot vacant right now, or is there a lot of trees they gotta cut down?
It was a treed lot.
Was, how long ago it was?
Yes,
Year
there are
ago.
some trees present on the lot. We have that tree line shown right now, and we're proposing minimal disturbance to the tree line. We are proposing some. You can see here we have our tree line. It's right next to our erosion control barrier, so we will be disturbing some of the trees in this area, but for the most part, like in the rear of the site back here where there are trees, and to the right of the site, we've tried to keep the tree disturbance as minimal as we can.
So there's no room to replace any of them on that? Doesn't look like there's much space left.
I'm new to this. Are we allowed to butt in? Or?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask?
Yeah, we will.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That tree line.
So
is
at this
non-existent.
point, I'll open it up.
Okay.
I mean, if you want, I'm all done.
No, I just was just wondering if there's any spot you can replicate those trees that
There's
were
no
taken
wetlands
down.
on it, so this is stormwater only. So we really
Okay,
don't have a replication option.
okay. Okay, now we're gonna open it. Anybody's gotta say
I
something.
need to stand up.
Yeah, just your name and.
Michael Cotty, 23 Norman Ave, neighbor to Gloria. She's the one who's mainly getting hit with this water issues. Basically, her backyard is a lake right now. I'm not getting hit that bad, but this tree line he's talking about, they gave us the 30-foot buffer after they took all the woods out, and it's doing absolutely nothing. I mean, it's scattered trees, maybe a dozen trees in that 30-foot buffer. So I don't know what he's talking about, trees helping out, because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about taking more out,
The trees,
so.
How was it before they cut the trees down?
there was no water,
I've been there
No.
30 years, not a drop of water.
never.
especially in her property. She is the lowland person,
Mm-hmm.
and there was nothing there ever. You know, and now she has the lake back there. She's got pictures to show you.
And that's kind of, it's not a,
So this
Wetland
proposal of his,
disturbance.
he's saying maybe it's gonna work, you know, in theory.
All right. Gloria Hopkins, 27 Norman Ave. Are you saying you're taking more trees down?
May I answer that question?
yeah,
Mr. Commissioner? Okay,
Can you fix his mic?
so
I know.
we are in this area, we're doing this, so just for the grading purposes, in order to install this basin. We are proposing to clear around, let's say, between 5 and 10 feet of trees in this specific area.
But
First
you've
was right.
already removed all my trees. That's why I have water.
See, part of the problem with this is you've come into this with the lot already being clear cut. Prior to the starting of this single-family home, it was a treed lot, fully vegetated. And now that you have cleared it, we're getting the stormwater runoff issue, which never existed beforehand. So you're guaranteed that you don't think there'll be any more. We're trying to make it so there is none where there was none previous. So we're looking for a little bit more guarantee that either this system needs to be made bigger or that it's gonna work. And
or you can make the house smaller.
It's too
They
late.
already poured the
It's
foundation.
already done.
Oh.
If I may answer your question, to hopefully alleviate some of your concerns. So I definitely understand where you're coming from as far as the tree clearing goes. It was not our goal of the applicant's intent to bring more stormwater to you guys. And just to address real quick, the roof runoff will be fully contained within these chambers back here. So there will be no runoff from both leaders from this underground pipes in these chambers. And so the only runoff that will be coming from our side will be from the driveway, from the grassy yard. And to further elaborate on the basin, we did perform test pits out here. We found that the material is essentially pure sand, to witness by the Board of Health agents can attest to that. So with the installation of this basin, for providing the loan, we did do some siding in accordance with the stormwater regulations, the mass stormwater regulations, and with those siding, that siding that we did, we tried to ensure that for the 100-year storm event, which is like the maximum rainfall event in a certain time period, to try to simulate the worst case scenario, we designed our basin based off of that information, and using that, providing a low point here, and then it'll pool in this low point that's still on our site. And then once it does get to that low point, there will be some runoff coming out of that. But again, we tried to, there's the reason I'm saying we're trying to make the best efforts, because there's no way to 100% guarantee that there's going to be no runoff. It's just the nature of how weather works. We never know what type of rain we're going to get. But with that being said, we did do designs, of course, with the 100 years. It's like the max worst event. And with those simulations, we saw very little runoff coming out of this basin through this spillway. So hopefully that answers your questions a little better. If you have questions, we have to elaborate further.
And the only thing that gets us is that this whole lot is in a wetland lot.
Right.
So that kind of,
so, I mean, as long, if it's designed for the 100-year flood, it's going to, or 100-year rain event, it will release water in an event greater or at that stage, but you won't have any of the silt or sediment that you're now having. So back when it was all trees and vegetated, you were probably getting runoff in that area, but it was clear water, and it would sit and disappear rather fast compared to what's happening now.
The
And because-
trees would take care of it
Right.
before.
And because you have
I
now,
have a gully behind me.
right,
Can you not force them to, put some trees in? Because like the tree, there's nothing there to absorb the water, right? There's nothing to drink the water.
He's talking about taking more out. I have none.
but in the is it retention area, when it's all seeded and everything like that, you can't put any trees up along the borderline, can you?
No.
That's the thing.
What if rather than seeding it, you put in stuff like they put in the gullies at the high school with like the natural vegetation so that it would absorb more of, I mean, grass isn't going to absorb that much,
Some more wetland
like natural
shrubs and stuff
vegetation,
like that, yeah.
Well, is he going to fill that gully behind me? Cause it's all tree stumps. It's all their garbage that they put there. It's their land, but I don't think they can do that.
From where the silt fence is now currently, how far back is the sloped area grassed area gonna start?
The silt fence where it is right now,
Right.
this location that we have shown on the plan, pretty approximate setup. Not perfect.
The silt fence pretty much lines with the straight property line, the buffer.
In some areas it does.
Right.
If you look at my question, in this area, it's almost exactly along the property line and extend further up in this area over here. And right at the edge of the silt fence is where we're proposing to start the grading for our basin rate.
Am I still gonna be allowed with a 30-foot buffer? That's my understanding.
She wants to know if she's still gonna be able to have the 30-foot buffer after this is all done.
When you say the 30-foot buffer, could you clarify on that point?
I think
According to building code.
that's the setback for the building.
Setback is what I mean.
Right, for the building itself. And the setback for the building's 62.
Well,
All right.
when they cut all the
The
trees down,
sidewalks.
they left us 30
So,
feet.
right
of,
now,
Yes.
scattered
this buffer
trees.
that we have shown
Scattered
for
trees.
trees, this is
But
building
it's their
seven.
property, right?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking, I don't know if they put markers right up to my borderline, right up to my property line, so I don't know what that means. The little orange stakes,
Mm-hmm.
so does that mean they're right up to my property
It's
or
part
what?
of the property. Is there any way you can replace some of those trees after everything is seeded and up against the property line and all that?
Yes, we can propose either trees or propose vegetation like arborvitae's or shrubs. If that's your preference, we can talk to the applicant about that and see if they're willing to do that. I think they would be in order to hopefully alleviate your concerns to bring some of the trees up and clear it back. And that in conjunction with the basin, I believe would alleviate a lot of the issues we're seeing at this moment. So that the commission would be comfortable with us.
Is that something?
Tim, I'm opposed to
Possibly.
them removing any more trees behind me. They've taken them all.
Yeah, the thing is, if it's on their property though, they can replace them after if we
They won't,
tell them to.
they won't.
Can-
If I
Between,
may,
there's also a large stockpile of material to the northwest corner. I assume that will be graded out and removed. Yeah.
Are you referring to this area?
Yes.
Here that I showed?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is more so a proposed area, supposed to put stockpile material so it doesn't spark quickly, but this isn't where it exists.
Can't understand what he's saying.
So would a planting of, say, 4 trees in that area and 4 trees in the backside of 2-inch caliper size
Anymore.
be sufficient?
That's something that we would, I talked to the applicant, but I think they would be 100% okay with doing that. And the commission is satisfied that we can implement that, and that can be as part of the decision approval as a condition for the site signed off. These plantings need to be done just to alleviate your concerns
Yep.
about the planting potentially not being done, so that can be a condition that we have to.
I'm just trying to see where we could put trees that would actually have a chance of living instead of just planting little tiny saplings that are not gonna probably take. And by putting 8 larger substantial trees, 4 on each side of that sloped area, that would hopefully give you a greater buffer, and once they start to get established, the runoff would be shed further out and not right onto that open.
And removing all that,
Right,
stumps and all that stuff that's there too.
I mean, trees do grow there, we had substantial trees there for many years, so.
Yep.
They will take.
I just don't know why they have to take any more of my trees.
well, it's, and again, looking at the elevations, where he's saying along that area that has to be graded, they may or may not have to take the trees. Because if you look at it's, to get the 96 to 96, it goes and curves into that area.
Yes, that's something that we could look at, just
So,
reducing the
yeah.
disturbance right
So
now. I
this
said-
is where the trees are, and he has to get to this elevation of 96. So they may have to take a few, they may not. It all depends on what the actual grading ends up having to look like. So, for whatever they take out, if they have to replace, take out 4 trees, they're gonna have to put 4 more in, and then put 4 more additional on the other side. As mitigation for whatever they might have to take down, and to help buffer what was replaced when the house lot was cleared.
It's hard to say, you can't,
I mean, I
can't take any more down, but they have the right to do it, but we can
Well,
also
why
make them.
wouldn't they want their own privacy? Why would they wanna be looking at my house? That's not
Well-
even normal.
I understand all the,
The reason why we're proposing the trees to be removed slightly in this area is due to the grading, as we were just discussing. So right now, we're proposing to tie back into the existing grades, and this creates a little bit of a swale channel, which will direct the runoff. Instead of going off-site to your site, it would go to this basin here via this grade. So we can do our best to pull back in this area, but really don't have a waterfront with the septic system and the building setback itself, which is why we have grade shown as it is right now. We tried our best to reduce any more disturbance to the trees that have more than already been done, but some of it will be due to the grading. It might be
it's, if this was a wetland
Right.
lot, we would have like the 50-foot buffer to tell them this is where you can go. You can't go any farther than that, but not, with it not being a wetland lot.
Well, it's a wetland.
We just have to
now.
deal with the stormwater.
Well,
Runoff.
and then hopefully after everything's done, everything's planted with the grass, put trees in. Might take a little bit, but in the long run, it should be able
He's not even
to.
guaranteeing it will work.
I know.
Clearly, he's not guaranteeing it.
Well, we are guaranteeing that they're gonna put in the trees, no matter what. So we're gonna do our best to try to help out the neighbors, even though it's not what you might not wanna hear, but,
Well, they created the wetland, not me.
well, it's runoff right now. It's not considered wetlands itself, but
You can fish in my backyard.
I know. I know what you're saying, but it's not considered wetlands, but, so, if we make them put the trees in and,
I mean, would 8 trees satisfy your buffer that you've lost?
To start.
Better than nothing.
I mean, I'm trying to come up with
More the
I
merrier.
mean, because we can write that in
Forest.
as part of their stipulation in the order of conditions for the permit.
They took down a forest, how do you count?
Right, I mean, as a property owner, they have the right to take the trees down. But they also don't have the right to put more water onto your property.
Yeah.
And so, by taking all the trees down, they've created a greater potential for runoff, which has happened, so now they have to figure out a way to treat that. And so, between increasing the tree canopy by replacing them and creating this stormwater basin and swale, they can direct it and channel it so it's not hitting straight down onto your property. It's going somewhere to be contained, and then when the basin overflows, it will go out
Yeah.
through all this rock
Minimum
at a slower
runoff.
rate than what you're getting now. Again, it's designed for a 100-year storm. The storm we just had that you're having all the problem, it's probably a 50-year storm. So theoretically, if the way this is supposed to work, the next storm of magnitude like this one, you shouldn't see anything coming onto your property.
Does that mean the silt fences are still working?
It looks like it is underroded, the silt fence.
Cause the silt fence looks like it's moved.
Right, it looks like the last
Rain.
2 storms in a row, because of the way the foundation was dug, it changed the topography, so all the water changed its path, and that's why it dug a trench. So they just have to stabilize the silt fence again.
Are they going to do that?
That will be part of the order of conditions, that they have to maintain it, and I get a weekly report until
mean
it's
tonight?
stabilized.
When you make
Yeah,
the
we
decision?
can work with our client and contractor, we get that stabilized ASAP. I don't know if they can do this week, but we'll definitely get on them to make sure that is taken care of.
So that'll be done before anything else is done further on.
What's the ramification if they don't do it, if they don't maintain the silt?
Get a fine. You can fine.
Yeah, there's capability,
For
once they're in
every day.
violation, to start
Who gets
fines.
fined, the contractor or the homeowner?
The owner, property owner.
Every day until it gets fixed.
Are they going to maintain the stone gravel up on by Lab like they did? They had laid stone along by Lab, and now the trucks have run it over, obviously, so it's no longer there.
They'll have a construction entrance during construction, which would be stone and grout, or a stone entrance to keep runoff and debris. And it looks like you do propose a swale along the edge.
Which are you referring to? We are close to the entrance right there, still.
Yep. And yes, the berm is along the side of the road, the
All right.
stone.
So
Oh,
where,
the berm, okay, yes.
Yeah.
This berm is, we had discussions with the DPW, and they agreed that in order to improve the drainage in this town right away, they would install a catch basin at the low point in Vital Ave, and then direct this runoff to the body plot that's owned by the town of Bridgewater, which is much further down to the
so is the DPW gonna put a berm up along the side of the road, which will funnel the water to the catch basin?
Right, so,
Yes, that is the intent of what the DPW
Okay,
do.
so all the runoff currently on Vital Ave, which is contributing to the runoff on this property,
oh, I know.
would be, a catch basin would alleviate that amount of runoff. So theoretically, you should have
Some officials.
all that runoff less going onto their property, so it will eventually be going through the catch
Because
basin.
that's where it's coming from, is Vital Lab.
Why does the
Right.
DPW put up the berm and not the contractor?
Yeah, that's one question too.
Because the town layout, town road, and the water's coming from the town onto their,
It's the
Property.
roadway itself, from the roadway.
Yeah, but it's
Right.
because of this though, it's because of the property built.
well, the water's always run onto that property
Okay,
Just trying to.
from the
divert it.
road.
Yeah.
And it's only because they're developing it and putting a house on it that this runoff issue has become an issue. Before, we were just dumping town water theoretically onto private property. Which, when there becomes a problem, they put catch basins in and berms up to redirect it. Which is what the plan is here, to eventually put a catch basin and a berm.
After it's all done, yeah.
So this berm will start at the way on the left side at the end of Vital Lab, correct?
Yes, the intent is before the power lines, high tension lines, and running down to the low point, which is roughly right where the driveway
Yeah, right with the driveway.
entrance would be. So it would be before the new driveway would be the proposed catch basin.
Okay, cause where the water is coming in now, cause I've seen the trench myself, it is coming from the top of Vital Lab. That's where the water is going to the trench, right down to my house.
Yeah.
Cause I've seen it.
So that would be a proposed berm that would channel all that water along the edge of the road and into the catch basin.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be coming onto that piece of property
Okay.
and then in theory onto your piece of
Okay.
property. because of the way it's sloped.
Okay. It is what it is. Not happy with it.
So we'll add a special condition for the trees? Or how do
A
you
general
want to
stormwater
word it?
permit with conditions for tree planting would be my
If I
recommendation.
would just like to make sure I understand, so proposing planting 2-inch caliber, would these trees ideal location to be planted on this berm? People like to install further. Just want to.
I can't understand.
He's asking where, he's talking.
Right,
about
if you needed to remove them
down
to
here
put them in,
or
you'd,
up there, like where-
Oh, so essentially getting that location.
yeah, we can work out the location to make it so that the swale can get in, and then we can figure out whether the trees go above or below, or a combination of both.
Understood.
It's not what you might not would have heard, but it's doing
But
the
I think
best we can
Between the catch basin going in,
and the trees being planted.
the trees in this swale and stormwater basin at the bottom, I think the catch basin at the top will take care of a lot of street runoff, which is adding to the problem coming across their site right now.
It will definitely help, no matter what,
Right, I mean, it's gonna
So-
reduce the amount of runoff that's going onto the site.
no
So
matter what.
it
If you're
should,
gonna take my trees down, I'd rather have the water.
Well, they're gonna put trees back up, so they'll give you some trees.
Yeah, 2 feet tall.
Well, I mean, you can't replace 80-foot trees.
That's right, that's why I want them left there.
I know. All right, so. Anybody else got any more questions? No. I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Did I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Then I'll entertain a motion to issue the general stormwater permit with special conditions?
Yeah.
Of planting trees,
8 additional trees.
8 additional trees to the property.
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then you'll keep up to date with us on everything that's with the plantings and all that stuff and the silt fence?
I'll do it as part of the permit.
Okay,
It's a general condition.
okay, but I mean, that'll be fixed first of all, though,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, reach out hopefully this week with an update. We get that.
Okay,
All right.
Yep.
Thank you all
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. It's a continued one, is 686 Manley Street.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you guys, nice to meet you.
Same here. Continue, I thought you just continue on.
We were, at the last meeting, we were just waiting on the final blessing from the consultant. And honestly, I think we got it the day after the meeting. Well, we meet Tuesdays, we got it that Thursday, so we're 2 days late. The only outstanding issue we had, he suggested that we dig a couple of more test pits in each of the drainage basins. He said it would be up to you whether you wanted to make it conditional and do it during construction, but we knew a guy that's got a machine, so we dug them last week, submitted the test pits to you. They were exactly the same as the other ones, so it didn't require any changes in the drainage system, so that was it. So we just really did that just so you wouldn't have to condition it and kind of leave that hanging out there, so.
and I will say that we did work on the entrance crossing
Right.
and narrowed that.
Yep.
From the proposed, so
Right in
there's
this area here.
less disturbance to the wetlands
Yep.
on that side, and we worked to mitigate as much disturbance amongst the parking area itself. There is some encroachment on one side of the 50-foot, but less on the other, and there's areas of 50-foot buffer that they're not gonna touch.
All right. So
So
kind of balances out essentially.
Same amount of replication plane though,
Right.
area
Exactly.
though, even though you shrunk the.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
That's basically.
and my only comment and recommendation is gonna be, only because I believe you have to go through planning board,
Correct.
which hasn't been scheduled yet, correct?
Exactly. We received our special permit from the Board of Appeals, just got it today, so we'll be submitting site plan approval hopefully this week, but if not this week, it'll be next week. So within the next week or so, we'll submit to the planning board for site plan approval.
And knowing that the planning board has to advertise it and go out and hold a public hearing.
Mhm.
And I know they're not meeting again, I believe, until the third Wednesday of January.
Correct. Yep.
Which, if they have changes or anything happening at that point, I would recommend continuing this until the February 6th meeting, just in case there's a change and you have to come back with plans. I don't want to see you have to spend money to re-advertise and open the hearing.
Open up in the hearing. That would be fine with us if you folks are okay with that. Sure.
Okay.
January 2nd.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problems after the changes were submitted.
But you never know, right? A little tweak here or there, you know.
Right.
If it's in the buffer zone, you guys should have your eyes on it, so we can certainly do that. That would be fine with us.
Okay,
Sounds so good so far. That's better than, a little bit better.
Yeah, yep.
It's good.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to continue to January 2nd.
February 6th, you said? Right?
Oh, February
February
6th,
6th,
sorry.
yeah.
February
Yeah.
6th.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks for the help, guys.
See you in February.
Happy holidays to everyone.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one is 44 South Main Street.
And they have sent a request to continue until January 2nd.
That's the one right there. I was looking at that one instead. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to continue to January 2nd.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then the next one is continue, but it's 0 Crescent Street, 217 Crescent Street, and 0 Stony Road. Okay, so.
All right. Do we have somebody presenting for that one?
Yeah.
Anybody in the hall?
Up there.
Did get a phone call this afternoon. They were
I
planning on
say,
being
look
here.
at me in here.
So, I would
That'd be
expect-
right on top of that one. Not paying attention, Jason.
Hi, sorry for the delay. Let's see. Are we all set? Do you need to do any intros or?
Nope, you're good to go.
Okay.
Sir.
For the record, my name is Claire Hogeboom. I'm a wetland scientist with LEC Environmental Consultants. I'm representing the applicant, Alan Drunas, who's in the room as well. We are here for the notice of intent application for Crescent View Farm Residential Subdivision. I'll just sort of briefly describe the site, jump into the project description, and regulatory compliance, and then sort of pass things on to questions after that. So firstly, just to orient ourselves, the site is sort of, I can even sort of shift this a
Yeah, I was
bit
gonna say if you need to, yeah,
so the audience can get a view. Is that all right for you
Yep,
too?
fine,
Okay. So our site is generally very approximately outlined in this white tape here. We have Crescent Street in the northeast southwest direction here. West Street, I believe, that's sort of west of the site here. And we have Stony Road to the east of the site. Mill Pond is just along the eastern property boundary here, and we have a perennial tributary to Mill Pond. I believe it's Mill River Brook, that discharges from this pond to the north and flows into Mill Pond here.
West Meadowbrook.
West Meadowbrook, thank you. And so our site generally is forested, undeveloped land. There's a degraded single-family building. Has that been? Two-family house? Still there at 217 Crescent Street, just off of the road there. Otherwise, it's generally undeveloped and either forested uplands, forested wetlands, or some upland meadow habitat as well. So just to put a bit more context to the site, here's Crescent Street again, and we have Old Crescent Street, which is a partially gravel road and paved road, providing access to a few single-family dwellings off of that road. Our site is comprised of 4 parcels. One very large parcel sort of centrally here. We have a smaller parcel, 0 Stony Road within the northern portion here. The two-family house is within a standalone parcel in the southern portion of the site, and it also includes this small triangular portion between Crescent Street and Old Crescent Street. So in blue, we have our bordering vegetated wetland boundaries, or I'll just call them BVW throughout the evening. We have an A series here that sort of has frontage onto Crescent Street and Old Crescent Street. And so all of this area is upland here. And then the B series represents the opposite side of that wetland system, sort of in the central portion of the site, the eastern portion of the site. So sort of this northern portion is all forested upland. There's an isolated wetland identified as a G series within this portion of the site. This F series, a little bump out that goes onto the site, actually connects with the B series. It just goes off site, so that's not a part of our project area. We have 4 isolated uplands within our wetland system here, identified with WB, C, D, and E series flagging. And we have mean annual high water flags within this little portion of the wetland. We identified a depression that exhibited the physical characteristics of vernal pool. And ultimately, all of those boundaries that I just discussed were approved through Conservation Commission review. An ORAD, or an Order of Resource Area Delineation, was issued in June of 2022, approving those boundaries, and that's valid for 3 years from the issuance. 2 last boundaries I do want to talk through, or perhaps 3, that were not included in the ORAD. This blue line work along the eastern portion of the site, that's bank associated with our mill pond. And so that sort of jets onto the site a bit. That was not reviewed or approved through the ORAD, but it's a very straightforward, conspicuous boundary. In addition to that, we have a few flags shown just off-site to the northeast, and that's a portion of the perennial tributary to Mill Pond. And while it's not shown on our plans, there would be a 200-foot riverfront area extending from that boundary, and that would be entirely contained within our BVW boundary. So it doesn't extend anywhere beyond our wetland flags. And the third is bordering land subject to flooding, mapped by through a FEMA firm. We have a FEMA line shown sort of along the eastern portion of the site, either within or just slightly above the BVW boundary. And that's indicating there's a zone A, the 100-year floodplain is sort of in the eastern portion of the site. The remainder of the site is outside of the 100-year floodplain. So that's generally the description of the site itself. We do have a cart path that sort of extends northwest through the site. And I just want to point that out because it will be a part of our discussion with the wetland crossing when we get to it. I'll actually just switch to this side of the presentation, which is our proposed project. So the project itself includes the construction of 3 subdivision roadways. We have Jeffrey Drive, that's extending directly from Crescent Street into the upland meadow habitat that we have here. I have highlighted in yellow the 100-foot buffer zone, just to give some context of what work is in the 100-foot buffer zone versus what's outside of it. And the pink is just identifying the sidewalks. This was used for the planning board meeting, so they had some, just wanted identification of the sidewalks, and I think it might be helpful for this discussion as well. So Jeffrey Drive, again, is going to be extending from Crescent Street, providing access to 6 single-family homes. And at the terminus, or the cul-de-sac of that road, we have an infiltration basin, I believe. And a portion of that basin is within the 100-foot buffer zone. We also have shown 2 of these dwellings within the 100-foot buffer zone, but I do want to point out that individual homes are not included in this application. We'll end up returning to the Conservation Commission for individual notices of intent for any homes or grading or features associated with individual single-family development that would be in the buffer zone. So
it's gonna be taken out of the development
it's
as an individual house?
yes.
So basically, we're looking at the stormwater structures and the wetland crossing for the infrastructure for the road. At this point.
Yes, right, so we're asking for permission for the roads, the stormwater, utilities, grading, clearing, that would be associated with that. And in order to design the stormwater, we do need to account for what we would expect for the homes, so that's sort of why they're, conceptually shown on the plan.
So if I can ask, I don't understand the relevance of that. If somebody can explain that to me.
Well, what ends up happening is any house lot that, or any lot that has wetlands that would be within the construction zone area would have to file before us. So some of these house lots will only be filing for stormwater permits individually, not a wetland filing with a notice of intent. And that's in each individual home as it's developed. But for the developer to put.
So why would it be included in the subdivision plan then?
Because for the planning board, they have to look at that. The Conservation Commission, for what we're doing, we don't look at, we look at the whole subdivision as a whole, but the only thing we're regulating is the stormwater systems itself and the wetlands that are in that layout for those structures. So then we get another look at each individual house lot, where the planning board will not be looking at each individual house lot because they will have already approved the subdivision plan.
But I don't understand why any of them would be allowed to be within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Oh, we're not saying that they will be or will not be. We're gonna try to,
We have a 50-foot no touch
Yes.
for new construction
Mhm.
without mitigation and a good reason for granting the variance. So at this point, they've come in with their plan, all of the work, except for the stormwater and the road layout, all the house lots they're proposing do not have any disturbance within the 50-foot buffer. They do have disturbance between the 50 and 100-foot zone, which isn't allowed use, but it's under our jurisdiction that they have to file before us, telling us they want to do it, and we have to approve what they're doing.
Okay, and then you made a reference to an ORAD. Can you tell me what that is?
So that's an order of resource area delineation, and that's an application that we come before the Conservation Commission with delineated wetland resource area boundaries on a site, and we ask for their approval of those boundaries. So it goes through a review process. At that time, the previous agent went to the site and walked all of the wetlands that we had flagged and confirmed them accurate. And so that process is something that most projects would do before they spend all this time and effort designing a project, to confirm that we know precisely where the wetland boundaries are.
And so, and I realize this isn't you, but why is perk testing done after that? Like, you set your boundaries, then the perk testing gets done, and what if they're wrong?
Well, they're perk testing theoretically outside of all the wetlands, and that's why you have the
Well,
wetland
I
flags done.
No, I
So,
understand that.
the
They're
wetland flags are
outside
done.
the
The
wetland.
perk test is for Board of Health, the septic system.
Mhm.
It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the Conservation Commission or the wetlands. It's just the perkability of the land suitable for,
Right, but in theory, if you were perking the land and the land was too wet, it wouldn't pass the perk test, and that could actually help you define your wetlands better.
Sort of yes and no in a way. When it comes to delineating wetland boundaries, there's 3 components that we look at. It's the soil characteristics, the vegetative community, and any indicators of hydrology. So that soil component that you would get from the perk tests, yes, that could be helpful, but those perk tests tend to go far deeper than what we're looking for to confirm a hydric soil.
Can you tell me what, I don't know what the term, obviously hydrology has something to do with water, but I don't know what that means. Can you tell me what that means?
The indicators of hydrology.
Yeah.
So that would be something, seeing standing water or saturation to the surface, or what we call oxidized rhizospheres in the top 12 inches of the soil. That indicates that water is within the top 12 inches of the soil profile. Buttressed roots, it's just sort of like physical features that you could observe that indicate water is standing here for at least 2 weeks during the growing season.
And it also tells you that where the water table is too, when you go down. To be
Right.
able to define whether or not how high you're gonna go with the septic system above the water table, which is 4 feet.
And that's why they need to do the perk test.
That's why they have to
So
do
in
that.
June of 2022, wasn't August of 2022, which was incredibly dry, but in June of 2022, it was still much drier than it is normally.
But that's when the soils come into effect.
Mhm.
And will tell you whether or not, if it's.
Right, like in the soil profile, you would dig a lot deeper than 12 inches as far as you can go. Usually we go at least 24 inches, and we use an auger that we sort of dig into the ground and evaluate those soil characteristics. But the indicators, the hydric indicators that you look for in the soil to determine whether it's hydric or a wetland soil versus an upland soil, you're looking in the top 12 inches for those indicators. And that's something that does not go away after 1 year of a drought.
It's kind of like, not to change the subject, but to the last, the lady that was here last time saying that now she's got standing water and she says it's wetland. Even though it's standing water there, it doesn't mean that it's wetland. Just because it's holding water there for a while, it's all because of the runoff. It's not getting filtrated through the soil quick enough. That's when, like with the soils, will tell you, even if it's a year, 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
can tell you whether or not it's wetlands or not wetlands.
Mm-hmm. And it was approved in June of 2022, but I believe we did our site evaluations between January and March of 2022 ahead of that. So we've had quite a number of site evaluations to determine the wetland boundaries out here. And again, they've been approved, and that line is valid for 3 years. So that's sort of what we've been working with through the site. I guess just to jump back into the description of the project itself, I think we left off with finishing that discussion. The next road we have is Fedway, extending from Old Crescent Street. And this is where our wetland crossing is here, and I'll move on to a plan that has a bit more detail, but I just figured I'd sort of show the overall scope here while we have it. Fedway continues through the wetland here, re-enters the upland in the rear of the site, and then we have sort of a loop provided through Henry Lane here. Let's see, we have, I believe it's 22 house lots in this northern portion of the site. We have 2 detention basins, and this basin here at the entrance of the site is like a dual use detention and infiltration basin. I believe that's all I want to go through as far as this overall plan set. I think what I next want to show is the plan that would depict our wetland crossing. So I'm just going to try to have this stay on the same sort of trajectory that everything else was, but here's Fedway coming from Crescent Street, sort of plan south. And in the pink, I have the BVW boundary, and in yellow, I actually have the 50-foot no-touch zone. I just wanted to sort of show that for the commission as far as what our efforts are to keep work outside of the 50-foot buffer zone on any of these plan sheets that we're looking at here. But most importantly, we have the crossing here. I believe it's a little over 400 linear feet going through the wetland itself. And then we just have additional work on either side of the wetland in the 50-foot no-touch zone. For both of those activities, under the bylaw regulations, we are asking for a variance for that work. Sort of got sidetracked. I just want to make sure I'm going to explain everything sort of sequentially, properly. So the wetland crossing itself is going to result in a total of 18,026 square feet of wetland impacts. That includes 15,733 square feet of permanent impacts. And the permanent impacts would be associated with the paved drive itself. That's 28 feet wide, a 4-foot wide sidewalk, grass shoulders, and retaining walls, which would just be vertical retaining wall in an effort to minimize impacts to the wetland, because alternatively we would be proposing grading, which would require more wetland impacts to accommodate that.
Can I just ask a question? I know you're just explaining, but I'm not really following. So we're paving through a wetland?
Yes.
How is that engineering
That's
wise?
an allowed use, because we cannot deny an applicant or a landowner rights.
That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, how is paving through a wetland adequate? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. It's wetland.
Well,
it's
there
not-
would be fill material brought in to elevate, and those retaining walls would hold that fill material in place, and the pavement would go on top of that. So it wouldn't necessarily be pavement slapped right on top of wet topsoil.
Yeah, but everything that's underneath that, even though you're bringing fill in, like how far down is the retaining wall going in? That doesn't make sense.
But they have to excavate through the wetland soils down to suitable soil below, or bring in and replace suitable soil so it's stabilized.
Mhm.
And part of the process, which you will, I'm sure, get to shortly, is they have to replicate or duplicate what they're disturbing.
No,
They-
I get the replication
Right,
that's down
yeah.
the bottom, I get that, but I'm asking that, I'm a lawyer, I am not a scientist, and so it is very difficult for me to understand how you can stabilize wetland around two things where you're putting fill in, and then you're gonna pave over the top of it, and that's going to actually hold for a very long period of time.
It's kind of like, well, it is a bridge.
But it's a bridge that doesn't have any wood pilings.
Well,
or
it's a
anything
retaining
else.
wall, and
It's
as
a-
long as the
Yeah.
wall's engineered with the right materials to
Mhm.
hold the vertical, what is it, 8 feet high?
Yeah,
It's 7 to 8 feet.
Depending on where it is.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, we have to take out every, there is suitable soils below the wetlands. So we have to go down to the suitable soils that our engineers tell us to go to, and then work back up. So that's the whole purpose of the replication, is that because we are gonna do away with that piece of the wetlands, we're gonna move it over. But there is suitable foundation underneath the wetlands. We just have to take off the hydric soils and anything that's unsuitable, and start from there and go back up.
And how do we know when we've actually gotten to that, like who's checking that?
So you have a peer review engineer consultant that works for the town that would be on site periodically checking our work. There's certain milestones we have to reach to get to a lot release, so we have to get their approval. So the town doesn't really have a town engineer per se, so what they do is they hire an outside consultant who is a registered engineer to come to the site. We usually have a pre-construction meeting, and then it's, whether it's weekly, monthly, whatever we need him to, every step they come and look.
And you
watch.
can't go any further until you get approved on that one step,
Exactly.
the second step, and the third step, right?
Okay.
Or whatever, how many steps it takes.
And who hires that engineer?
The town.
The-
We
No,
pay
no,
for
I
it.
They pay for
We
it.
pay
No,
for
but
it.
I'm saying, who,
The planning board.
okay.
And we will be recommending for conservation, the 53G as
Yeah.
well. And that person will also review the stormwater bylaw and the stormwater requirements that will need to be done, as well as the wetland and conservation side of it. So that contract would be working in conjunction with planning board for us. I do know who the planning board's using, and I'm gonna recommend that we've used him in the past for a number of projects, and he's done good work for us, and he's reliable. And so I have no problems using the same engineer for.
And I just want, I don't mean to interrupt, I just want to stress that the consultant is not somebody who just, it's somebody with credentials. I mean,
Oh, I understand that they
Okay.
have credentials, but
Okay.
I also understand that there's several developments in town over the course of the last, say, 15 to 20 years, that somebody has approved them and they have caused water to go into other people's homes.
Okay.
And so it says to me that somebody's not doing the checking that they need to, so perhaps maybe that's not the person we should be using.
I know that since I've been on the board, from day one to now, we have issued a lot more rules and regulations, even created even more for house lots to help provide less water for any kind of neighboring or any kind of, for any situation. From what I've seen, we've come a long way. 10 years ago, it'd be like this, it was altogether different. It was like you said, not saying that it's just let it go.
Well, I'm not saying it's a
but we just
specific
never
person
even-
either, but what I'm saying is that I know that we were in a development
Mhm.
where there were homes that were built that sat above us that caused water in
Yeah.
our homes. So I would like to ensure that specifically those people that are sitting down,
Sort of south
Yeah.
of Crescent.
that any of that displaced water is not going to not only those homes, but the homes that are right next to it that are already there. There's 3 homes, like 3 or 4 homes, 3 down
And
there.
that's
Yeah,
part of the
and-
53G
Yeah.
review process is to look at all that.
Exactly, right. Our engineer put together a comprehensive stormwater report and analysis that the 53G consultant will be reviewing and providing any comments if we need to take a look at it. But typically that analysis would also include sort of pre-construction, like existing condition, hydraulic analysis of where the water's going and sort of like micro watersheds within the site. And then also compares that with post-construction. So that's something that
Stuff that we
consultant
can't
on
do.
behalf of the
Stuff that
town
we
would
can't
take a
do,
look
and
at.
that's overlooking what they say that they did. Now it's overlooking them.
Right.
So it's helping us out big time. So,
And if I can just add to back up on the perk test, so the Board of Health is who we have to
Responsible.
satisfy that. But part of that process is the Board of Health agent witnesses those tests. The tests are conducted by a licensed soil evaluator.
Mhm.
So it's not, even if it's done in the driest time of the year, if we dig a hole in the ground 8 feet deep and the water's down at 6 feet, if there's a rust line, which is called oxidation, that determines the water table. If it's at 2 feet, that's what's written down, that this lot has a water table of 2 feet, not 6 feet. So it really doesn't matter what time of year you're doing your perk tests, as much as,
What the soil says, where the
way
high
back-
water
way
table
back
level
when,
goes
it
to.
mattered, because nobody ever, you didn't have soil evaluators, you didn't have, you didn't use these methods, you used, what you saw.
Yeah.
But what you see now doesn't really matter, other than that rust line, and that's what determines the water table. So, I understand your concerns about, we're doing perk tests in June or July or whatever. It's doesn't really matter at this point, so.
the land's actually working out for us.
Yeah.
Because it's telling you guys.
Yeah.
No matter what.
So I'm sorry, I
Excuse
don't
me,
mean to keep hijacking.
I have a
No,
question.
That's what we're here for.
Somebody's got a question?
Yes?
Yeah, my name's Tricia Bowers. I'm on Zoom. I live at 347 North Elm Street, so I'm just an interested neighbor who goes back and forth by this, by this area, quite often. And, my question is, someone just said that, there's gonna be a variance required to put this road in. And someone else just said that we cannot deny a variance, I think is what was just said. We cannot deny a variance to the developer. Is that what I just understood?
No, we can't deny them access to an upland area without, I mean, they have to give us a mitigation to get there, but we can't say they cannot build a road or a path or get to an upland area, whether it's for one house or for a subdivision. I mean, it's their right as a property owner to have access to that.
And I can sort of elaborate on that too. That was sort of a part I was prepared to get to at some point, so I can kind of jump ahead. So considering that we have a large amount of impact here, about 15,000 square feet of permanent disturbance, that does exceed the allowable threshold under the state Wetlands Protection Act regulations. It's 5,000 square feet, so any more than 5,000 square feet, you need to request a project to be approved as a limited project. And there's only, a certain number of limited project types. And so this is being proposed as a limited project for access to buildable uplands. So that limited project request is made to the Conservation Commission as the issuing authority. They have the discretion to approve a project, and they have to take into consideration the magnitude of the alterations and consider and request information from us related to how did we avoid this, how did we minimize our impact to wetlands, and how did we mitigate those. So we touch on a lot of that in our application. I can sort of go into all three of those if you'd like, or
And on the building, isn't like, you have to get the Army Corps of Engineers?
yes, so since we exceed 5,000 square feet, we are going to have to go to Army Corps of Engineers with the pre-construction notification. And that's something we would just like to do after we get through this process with Conservation Commission, just in case there are any plan changes that might warrant, any revisions before we go to them for their review.
And that will kind of hopefully give you a little bit of help on how you build a roadway in a wetland and build it up right with the help of the Army Corps engineer.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll take a look at those calculations and provide any additional
And another
comments that
level
we
of
don't
scrutiny.
hash out here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess I can jump into the wetland replication because I know we talked a little bit about that, but didn't get into great detail on it. So again, here's where our wetland impact is. Our replication is shown here, very close by our impact area. I'm just gonna go to the plan sheet that shows more of the details of our replication. So we presented this project informally to the commission, I believe this spring. And that's where we asked for some input from members of the commission on the ratio of replication that you would all prefer. That's where we received input that you would prefer that we go a 2-to-1 replication for area lost. So we've provided that through this replication area. It's a little over 31,000 square feet. We have about 270 plus shrubs and saplings proposed to be planted there, a very diverse plant list here. We also have a wetland seed mix that'll go in, as well as about, I believe it's 90 pots of ferns as well, just to establish the ground cover there. We do show it approximately, I believe it's about 25 feet off of the toe slope of this road. And I touched base with Tim this morning, and Tim mentioned that the commission might request that we consider a bit more of a pushback off the road. So we can consider that if you guys would prefer, and we could even consider in an effort to keep it at a 2-to-1, just elongating it here, and we'll just see how we can match,
Right.
mix and match.
Is that because of runoff?
The concern was that we have the 50-foot no touch, and putting the road runoff and the 50-foot and the new wetland line literally right beside each other. Yes, you're not gonna get any stormwater or salts necessarily, they're gonna be in the catch basins and the drainage system, but when you're plowing snow, that's gonna
Still
go
gonna
over.
flow, yeah.
Yeah,
Right, and the
And that
potential to get into the replicated new wetland, so if we could create
yeah, we don't
bigger
wanna
one.
ruin a
Right,
wetland
what
that we just spent a lot of
created.
time making.
And that replication area is an upland,
Correct.
just so
Right, so
people know that too.
So it'd be, currently, this is a part of the site, there's a lot of Tatarian honeysuckle and multiflora rose, so, non-native invasive plants. So in essence, this replication area would be an improvement to that portion of the site, in addition to providing, you know, the functions and values of the area lost times 2. So that's something we're happy to consider, just elongating it and pushing it back. Do you have any input on, you know, what's the most you want to go back? I think if we went 50 feet, that might take a large chunk out of this, like would
How far
40
back is it
feet
now?
off? It's 25 feet currently.
10.
Went another 10 feet to 35 feet and then just elongated the distance.
To get the
Okay.
square
Around
footage the same.
If it takes to the old Crescent Street kind of
Yeah,
corner
that's
where
okay.
it needs, it would.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have another question.
Yep.
So, if that's already uplands, how is that a replication of wetland?
So a part of our plan would be how you typically would start these replication areas is you excavate approximately 12 inches below your proposed grades. So equipment would take out the soil, the topsoil in this area, go 12 inches below our proposed wetland grade, which would still be lower. The idea is to really match the existing wetland line here and the elevation there. So we excavate 12 inches, backfill with 12 inches of clean organic topsoil, and that would essentially match the existing wetland line, or the elevation of the undisturbed portion of wetland here. And of course, during construction, we have, or you know, during excavation, wetland scientists, either LEC, we've worked with Al before on these projects, and we'll come out to the site before they backfill, and we come out with our shovels and we confirm that we're actually observing evidence of hydrology in the water table and confirming that it would stay within 12 inches of the soil profile before they start backfilling.
So you would turn that upland into a wetland,
Correct.
if that's what you're wondering, Karen.
And it's important for us to have her confirm that we're doing it correctly, because if we don't have that connection, as you say, hydraulically, the plants, all these plants we're putting in, they're not gonna make it. They're only gonna make it in a wet area. And we're not gonna get completed with that job, we're not gonna get signed off by this commission.
Right, and
And
they
we, you know,
they
there's
have
a
to have
lot of-
70% survival rate
Right.
once the project's completed.
Right, and so we include in our proposal, and happy to have it in the order of conditions, however you prefer to write it, that we'll do 2 years of post-construction monitoring to ensure that this is a successful wetland replication area. We provide reports to the commission before the end of the year. And of course, those would also include any recommendations for additional excavation if necessary, if we aren't achieving hydrology as expected, or replacement of dead or stressed plantings, or lastly, we would also keep an eye on the establishment or colonization of any invasive species and provide recommendations to the contractor of how to, you know, remove those.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Okay. And then the other side.
I feel like I may have covered it. I probably had so much more I could talk about, but
One
you
of
know,
the
if you
questions
guys
that
want me
has
to
come
go
up
into more.
is the culverts and the crossing. And I know we talked about that earlier today, of possibly looking into
Yeah.
increasing the culvert size.
Yes. Yeah, currently we're proposing 2 24-inch diameter equalizer pipes to allow for hydrology to the connectivity to remain on either side of the crossing. And I believe your concern and the commission's concern was more so about like wildlife connectivity and allowing for some sort of crossing. Perhaps we would consider, you know, an open bottom box culvert in the central portion, and whether it would replace these or we would keep these and do that. We can talk with the engineer and see what he thinks would be appropriate for design.
Because it's a pretty long
It is,
Um,
right.
retaining
Like a
wall.
So if we do a 3x4 is what we just did on another project, open bottom, that way there's, put that in the middle, and like she just said,
Right,
if
I
we need,
mean, and
if we
again,
need
the-
those pipes, we'll leave them, if we don't need them, then we don't need them.
I mean, the pipes are okay for salamanders and frogs and toads, but you get something a little bigger,
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
looking down a hole that looks that big, and
Yep.
they're not about to go that way, they're gonna go to the sides and up and
Right.
over and across the road and.
No
So-
problem.
Putting a box culvert in the middle,
Yes.
what about putting two more on either end with a,
Two more
Like
box
replacing
Or
the
replacing
24 inch
those.
replacing
diameter.
those
Box
with two,
culverts, or-
with two box culverts, including the middle one, and making them 6?
How about if we did 2 box culverts?
What size?
They're 3 foot, they're 3 foot high, 4 foot wide.
Could you do it 6? 4 feet, 6?
6 foot wide, it gets kind of
That's what I mean.
construction wise. I mean,
Okay, so then
I
do
mean,
what
if you're
you.
doing a 4 foot wide, you know,
Mhm.
I mean, what kind of habitat are we trying to get through there? You know what I'm saying? Because it's not that far across.
So what about putting 3 of those in? 3 foot by 4?
Boy, you're hard.
Can you do that? Put it this way.
I don't know, let's talk to the engineers and see
Yeah.
what we can come
Talk
up
to the
with.
engineer
We know we're
and
gonna
find
at
out.
least need
Okay.
2, and
Yeah.
if we can fit a third, or if we
Yep.
do a combination of something to make that work.
Because,
Yeah.
like Tim's saying, the pipe, that if we use the 24-inch culverts, it's not like they're gonna not be used by certain.
Something's gonna
Yeah,
lose
but
them,
that's not gonna be big enough, I don't think.
And that's why you'll have the other 2 box
I
culverts.
don't wanna
having
do,
the open bottom ones make it
yeah,
easier for.
I don't
lot.
wanna, make the, structure not work right, but
And we have a very experienced wildlife biologist on our staff. I can consult with him as well and just sort of get an idea for that long of a crossing, like what would he recommend, and we can, whether we come up with 1, 2, or 3, we'll certainly, provide
All right, cool.
try for,
support.
try
what
for
we're-
3,
At least 2.
most you can. Hopefully 3, if not, we'll see what happens.
Okay,
And-
let's let them do their thing. Let the engineer, let the wildlife person look at it.
Yep.
And determine it by the length of it.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
We go back to the mill pond.
Do you want the existing
Let's
condition?
go to the big
This one?
map we got there first. My name's David Thompson. I own the dam that impounds the water,
Oh,
called a mill pond. Now, the reason they called them mill ponds is because it was a mill that made the pond. It wasn't Jones's pond or Robin's pond or anything. So when the United States Geographical Survey came in, they said that any ponds, the named ponds, are gonna be ponds. But it's not gonna be, they didn't name it as an impoundment of water. And the mill pond is impounded and it's at a level, the dam up north, West Meadow Dam, failed and took out a breach on an old sluiceway, not a sluiceway, an old raceway, which is bigger than the opening that I have now. So consequently, the pond stays at the same level. I got the boards in it, and I can't raise the water. I can lower it, but I can't raise it. But I would never lower it because of all the, all the birds and everything in there. But the pond doesn't freeze. Doesn't freeze at the channel. It breaks up here 2 channels, and it moves. This water moves. Sometimes during the winter, if we get a freeze, it's really cold freeze, it'll freeze over in that open channel. But 3 or 4 days later, it's gone again. And in the springtime, when it breaks up, the geese come and sit, and big chunks of ice come down, and they flow down through and right over to the river and block up the dam. So there's movement there. You can throw a bobber in, or a wood, or sit in a canoe, and you drift. You drift down there. That water is moving. There's current there. So that's my concern, that it's, and when they were doing the surveying, I went over and I helped them find some markers, some pinholes in the granite. And we were talking about something, he said, they're calling this a river, is what they said. They're calling this a river. And it is a river. It's, all the herring come up here. I'd like to,
So are you worried about it not flowing right?
no, I'm just worried about the buffer zone,
Okay.
you know? It puts it in a different buffer zone. And I'm asking the Conservation Commission to, come down and observe the riverine characteristics of the pond, the impoundment. You know, it's very narrow, you can see that it's very narrow. And it's, the average, show this dry. The average depth is 2 feet, 2 feet deep. Most of the depth is in front of the sluiceway where they needed the depth, the height to get the, get the power to the turbine. The pond is also loaded with Eurasian milfoil, loaded with it. And what that does is chokes the water up, and all the current will go over the top. So it's and you know that, right? So it's a moving body of water. It has movement in it. It's not a pond. It's a river.
Yep.
That's it. And I'm asking you to come down and do a visual inspection of it and see that it moves.
Okay. Thank you.
So even if it is a river, that'd be 200 foot, but the 100-foot, 200-foot jurisdictional, 100-foot, which you're outside of, I believe, everywhere along that proposed work.
Right, so, for example, if it was to be confirmed a river with riverine characteristics, we would have a 200-foot riverfront area. And there are certain regulations for work within riverfront area, primarily, in the outer 100 to 200 feet, you are permitted to do a certain amount of work under particular thresholds, and stormwater features are allowed. It's something we can look into. When we were doing the ANRAD review to receive that ORAD for resource area boundary confirmation, we did flag this, presuming it was banked to the pond. I don't know where the surveyor was coming up with the river. Perhaps he was thinking about what we flagged up here, which we absolutely were calling the river. There just may have been a, miscommunication, but there is a certain part in here where it's very clearly riverine characteristics, a channelized feature, and it sort of discharges into here. It's something we can certainly take a second look at and meet with the commission out in the field to discuss it, or if the 53G peer reviewer wants to sort of tack that onto their list, we can certainly take a look at it. But ultimately, the determination of riverfront area and protectable rivers versus ponds is sort of first determined based on the most recent USGS topographic map, and that does indicate this area as Mill Pond. It's not indicated as a perennial river, but certainly there are ground conditions that you need to confirm, because we're not just going to look at a map and say this is what it is, right? So we're certainly open to taking a second look at that with the commission to make sure that we're getting all the resource areas accurately.
I don't know where you usually find fish, and I'm just curious, do you usually find herring in a pond, or do you usually find herring in a river?
They come up in the ocean. They spawn in the pond.
We didn't really do a fish survey, so I can't really confirm or deny what's there, so you would absolutely know more than me about what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis with what's living in that pond.
Well, I see in the springtime, when the herring are running, I see schools of herring, small ones, about 2 inches long, and it's like the water erupts, then it disappears and comes back, and then they go down the fall and they congregate at the basin. And then the big ones come in, they swim by, and that's pretty interesting.
And I believe that's something also through the ORAD, I'd have to take a second look at exactly how it was worded, but when John Delano was taking a look at the site, I did let him know, hey, we flagged this. Is there any determination we can make on this pond versus river? I could take another look at how he worded it, but I know when he was reviewing the ORAD, he did take a look at the sort of flow characteristics to the east of the site. So we can certainly evaluate how that turned out as well. But I know we didn't ask him to confirm any flags.
I'd like to ask another question, please. It's Tricia Bowers. When you do the wetland, I've limited understanding of all of this, but I'm trying to understand and follow. When you do the wetland replication, does that resulting the uplands that you've turned into a wetland, does that have the same benefits as the wetlands have, such as recharging the underlying aquifer systems and things like that?
Yeah, so if properly constructed and installed and maintained through monitoring, the idea is that when you create wetlands, that they would provide those functions and values that are provided in the natural wetlands on the site. And the key to meeting the standards under the state regulations and mitigation standards that are provided under the state, we do have to tie into an established wetland system. So we're not creating a wetland in a bowl somewhere that isn't going to provide those recharge functions and values or stormwater storage, any of that, any of those characteristics. We're really tying into this wetland, and we're essentially expanding upon an existing wetland on site.
Okay, because with all of our water concerns here in town, you know, last summer we were told there wasn't enough water for everybody in town, and you know, it was a critical situation. So I think you know, a lot of us neighbors feel that it's very important to maintain these wetlands. It's because it's so important to our water, our public water supply.
And that was one of the reasons the commission asked for the 2-to-1 replication, was so that we could hopefully improve upon and guarantee success, and that this will actually function as it's supposed to, for all the disturbance that would be happening. A couple other things I quickly wanted to bring up is there is the footpath, as it's referred to on the plans, but it's really a cart path or a logging road. There is an area at the beginning of Old Crescent Street stretch that goes out that's in the 50-foot area that would typically be a do not disturb area under our bylaw. And I did mention when we talked earlier today of possibly regrading that, smoothing it out, even if it's just a wetland seed mix or something to reestablish it as a buffer.
Right.
And get rid of the road that's
Yeah,
there.
because the road is gonna be the
Right.
path.
The road,
It's gonna take
cart path that's there is gonna
place of that
disappear,
path, yeah.
but there's some pretty good gullies and ruts in it, which some
No
of it's
problem.
standing water, and if we can kind of
No problem.
clean that up as we're
Yep.
improving that 50-foot buffer as it goes back in.
That's where doing that, like I'm looking at the map, like why isn't there the ability to move that road over?
Over in this direction,
Nope, other way.
over in
Well,
that
then you'd be
direction.
cutting into more wetlands.
Yeah.
So they kind of, where they have it is through the narrowest spot to cross where the wetland is.
Are you? Because I don't really see any difference between from where you are to from the corner of that other piece.
If you have the other plan
To
that's
the corner of this, if we went straight,
Well, that's upland right there.
this is wetland right here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
This doesn't look that different to me than this.
You're saying if the road went in this direction?
Yeah.
That would cut through a wetland. This is a wetland right here.
But
So
isn't that a wetland?
So they'd still have to cut through the wetland up above.
I might be able to,
Do you have the wetland map that's got
see if there's a
the
better.
pre-construction?
Oh, there we go. Here's sort of the site entrance. So that's coming up Old Crescent Street, and it's just finding that sweet spot. This yellow line work is the 50-foot buffer, so there's wetlands on both sides. So if we were going to cut from the corner of this lot here, we'd be impacting more wetlands.
So see, there's a very
And-
small sliver of upland that juts into that wetland area.
And you probably wouldn't have the spot for the replication area either, because you,
Yeah, we
Cut
would be
more
cutting
into
into our replication, adding more impact, taking away potential replication, because
Yep.
with the consideration that we just talked about a little earlier of pushing off the buffer and perhaps making this line, maybe it'll look something more like that. We'll have to start considering, okay, we'll extend the wetland replication a bit more to get our 2-to-1 ratio.
to be able to create more wetland, yes.
Right.
And then I have another question about, and it might not be might be out of scope, but how do you get utilities out there and not disturb more wetlands?
So the utilities will all be subsurface. We have a water main that's going within the, I believe under the grass within the
It's probably
roadway.
over the pavement.
It might be under the pavement for the water utility. Oh yeah, it is. I see, there's a water line under there. And then, was it electric, telephone, internet, that would also go.
That goes on the side.
Subsurface.
It stays within those 2 retaining walls though. Any and all utilities stay within those walls.
And have we done any kind of assessment on the water, like, again, don't know if this is out of scope, but on the water piping on Crescent Street, if it's going to provide like adequate push
Water
through to
department
that
would be
property?
looking at, they're the ones that would
Right,
permit the
it's been
hookup
sent
for
to
the town
them, to the
water.
water commissioners, they're the ones that comment on that. It's our belief that, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it might be a 16-inch main up there.
Yes.
It's a rather large main, so it should be more than sufficient to what we have to do, but that's up to the water department to make that determination.
And when do you go in front of the water commissioners, if you know?
I think the plans have already been sent to them. I'm not 100% sure, but I think when we file with the planning board, it goes to all departments.
Do you have to appear in front of them or no?
Do I have to what?
Appear in front of the water commissioners or no?
Ultimately, we do to get permission to tie into it, yes.
So I have a couple quick questions on the stormwater side of what we have to deal with, which maybe you can answer, maybe you can't.
I can try, otherwise I'll take notes for the
Okay.
engineer.
There's 4 basins. The front 2, so basins
This
1 and 2,
and that.
are those dry or wet? Meaning
These-
they intended to hold water.
So we have an infiltration basin here. I believe that's intended not to hold water continuously. This would be sort of a dual infiltration detention basin. It sounds very interesting, and I would love to try to explain that.
Right,
I'm not
that's- I'm
exactly
just-
sure how long they would expect that to hold
Right.
water. Like maybe it's not a true detention basin that's always holding a foot of water, but maybe it's-
Retains it during the highest storm
Right,
amounts and then
so
drains
we
and
can
dries as it.
certainly, we can ask the engineer to provide a little more like context to that one. And then in the northern portion of the site, both of those are full detention basins.
So they're intended to hold water continually and actually become a
Yes.
wetland.
Right.
And my concern, the multiple concerns I have is, one, a maintenance aspect, that this I assume is eventually gonna be asked to be a town road and a town system. So the town's gonna be responsible for maintaining, upkeeping, and taking care of these. The dry basins, they can go in and mow 2 or 3 times a year and keep them down. I mean, as we've seen with the skate park, which was designed as a detention basin / skating park, they could only mow it once this year, and they had to mow it when it had standing water in it because it was so wet.
Right.
Knowing that, you're gonna have one that's gonna be dry, one that may or may not be wet, and then you're looking at 2 at the back that are going to be wet all the time. That's gonna be something that Plymouth County Mosquito Control will have to deal with, and you're gonna have a potential West Nile, Triple E, and all of that to deal with. We
So,
prefer dry basins wherever possible, but if wet ones, it's gonna become a town with MS4 regulations, and EPA stormwater, something the town is gonna have to adhere to and maintain and keep up with. So we just wanna make sure that the town's aware of that going in, and that we have a maintenance plan that the town can live with going forward if this becomes a town road.
And
Yeah, and I understand that the planning board would determine after everything's constructed if they want to take it or not. So they would say, okay, this looks great, we want it, or this is not what we were expecting, or we just decided we don't want it. So they'll determine if they want it after everything's constructed, but during the planning board review process, from what I understand, like, they are sharing what they would want if they were to take it. So I'll remind the engineer to think about that.
To
if
the
it's-
town spec, and we can certainly ask Bob the question, can we do dry as opposed to?
Right, I mean, I'm just looking at it from a maintenance standpoint for the town.
Or if we have to do detention, then, you know, make sure the O&M plan really has,
I mean, a lot of
the
times we get
maintenance
the commercial
details.
ones come before us and the commercial entities own and maintain them and it never becomes a town problem.
mhm.
Subdivision like this, it does become a town problem. And we've had some in town that have had underlying homeowner associations with them. And now the town's got a town road with homeowner association utilities underneath. And if those utilities fail, who becomes responsible for those septic lines and systems that are now on town layouts, even though it's a private homeowner
No,
association?
we'll ask the question.
and with it being either dry or wet, to make it dry, would you have to expand it, raise it up more?
I'm not,
You don't know?
That's
Yeah,
a
that's an engineering
Yeah.
question, and I knew that,
Cause
that's why I didn't wanna
cause
go into that if we,
Right, like, we could certainly explain that in some supplemental information to you guys as far as like, can we go dry? If not,
and if we do,
why?
this is
And would
why,
it result in more impact? Do we just not have the space for it?
So what happens if they say, okay, you can go dry if you want, but it's gonna expand and not be able to
it also needs to function.
build a house
So-
on either side, you're gonna have to have
Oh, yeah.
more.
We gotta, you know.
So you
it's
have to
too
lose a
early.
couple of houses here and there if they said you can go
And
dry.
maybe they can make 3 smaller ponds in different locations to, I don't know. That's
We
very,
could
very
take a
good
look for,
question.
it could
Very good
it
question.
could also just have something to do with the water table where it is, and dry just wouldn't ever be able to happen, but we can certainly ask the engineer to give us some more reasoning to
See if
that.
they can go dry in those spots that hold, because if you can go dry, make it go dry.
Yep.
If you have to go up, make it bigger. I'd rather see one big one and lose a couple of houses to 3 different spots, but you have to impact the different areas.
The only thing about multiple, and I'm not an engineer,
Yep.
is it gets the water into the ground in different locations as opposed to one
No, I
one
understand,
concentrated area. So it kind of gets, you know, I mean, the ultimate goal is to
but you can't,
clean the
even though
water.
it's bigger,
and then
can't you
get it
have different
back in.
outlets in different areas out of that one big one?
Possibly, again,
So like instead of a 3, you have a big one, you got
Yep.
outlets going out, and like you would have in 3 different ones.
let's see what he has to say. We'll get with him.
We'll see if you can get a dry one.
Yeah. No problem.
The wetland easements that are on the plans,
Mhm.
I've noticed they're part of the planning board's presentation, they're on our presentation, however, they're gonna end up being lot by lot, I would assume,
Right.
because they're individual homeowners for each individual lot.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have an easement shown sort of in the western portion of the site here, this really large easement, and it's sort of just tied into that house, this home. And they sort of just extend to the
Yeah.
rear of these lots here, and an easement here as well with the detention basin.
So there's one lot that I believe does have an easement for maintenance on that detention pond. There's a 20-foot wide, I believe, for the large one on the easterly side.
This,
Nope, up
oh,
above.
this one
Yeah.
here. Oh, yes, just between these two
Yeah.
lots here.
There's probably a pipe that goes through there, that's why there's a 20-foot easement.
Yeah, I see a drain.
But there's no access easement?
Well, it'll be one and the same.
Okay.
Yeah, one and the same.
Just wanna make sure the town, if we end up having to take
Oh,
care
no,
of it,
you
we have a
gotta-
way to get
no,
there.
Every one of them has to have
Um,
access, absolutely.
And
If you've got water easements and they're flowing up, how does that work?
Water easements?
If you've got easements running through those properties and you were saying that they just flow out, that property is up, it's on a hill, it goes this way.
Okay,
So how can you have water flow up?
I'm confused by
The-
the water flowing up.
the high ground is basically where the houses are pictured there, and then it slopes.
Yeah.
It slopes
away
down towards
from it.
the east.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, so if you've got things that are flowing out, but it's like those, the two lots at the very top, they're flowing out, they're flowing back into the other houses, aren't they?
No, that's not.
Those have no wetlands on them, and the way they're
Right.
pitched, they're
Yeah.
just graded across.
Are you
Into
asking
open.
like just about the direction of stormwater going into the basins?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's where sort of the pitch of the pipes would all be sort of draining and directing towards the ponds themselves. It would just be a part of the grading plan and sort of how they're all installed.
And so one of the things they're supposed to be taking into consideration post-development is how high they raise it. And from what I'm hearing, obviously, I haven't looked at all of the data yet, but all the stormwater runoff for each house lot is accounted into the stormwater infiltration system. So it's not like it's a house that's going onto a public way already where there's no detention basin and then now the town's accepting that water. This one's designed so all those house lots, all the water runoff will go into the detention basin, and it's big enough to contain it.
So all the roofs, all the driveways, anything impervious. That's why we're showing houses on every lot.
Right.
To
So that the
design
drainage can be-
accordingly.
Justified.
Right. And so with a stormwater bylaw, say one of these houses was to want to double its footprint, if it had room on the lot to do it, that would require them to deal with that stormwater on their own site. They couldn't add it as runoff to the road, so they'd have to do an infiltration system on site as part of the stormwater regulations. This being a new subdivision, they're incorporating all of what's existing
And we probably have,
and overbuilt.
exactly, definitely is overbuilt.
Then it can be dry. Come on, there you are, you're the engineer.
Listen, I'm with you. I'm with you. I have
Yeah.
no problem making it dry.
So,
One of the questions that's come up, and I'm not sure, this is a planning board issue more than a conservation, but part of the planning board requirements, and I didn't see a waiver request for it,
yes.
is there's supposed to be a certain amount of open space set aside for park and open space land under their subdivision bylaw.
Okay.
One of the things I would ask that if you haven't requested it and you're not going to, and you're gonna set aside a certain percentage, if there's any way that the Conservation Commission could get access to Mill Pond. The commission itself owns and controls about 80% of Mill Pond's area around it. It's landlocked, we can't get to it. The
Okay.
town can't use it, can't get to it, couldn't, if there was any way, and I'm just looking at that drainage pond and the easement that's already gonna be created to get to it, if something on the backside or there's some way,
Since there should be from the planning board, something put aside,
right,
was it like an acre?
there's a percentage, a minimum of 1 acre per 20 house lots for a new subdivision. It's supposed to be set aside as usable park space,
Like kids and all that
activity areas, and it's an upland area.
Hmm.
But knowing whether that's asked for as a waiver already or not, if it's gonna be figured in at some point, if it could be in around the Mill Pond side of the development so that we could gain access to Mill Pond, the town, at least the Conservation Commission
Now,
would greatly
you-
appreciate
Now,
that.
you suggesting that on top of hopefully putting aside like whatever size upland you're supposed to put away for the
Right, I mean, it would be.
planning board, or are you suggesting?
Well, no, it would be, I mean, if
Us
they have to
taking
put
that,
aside a
yeah.
1 acre parcel of upland for a park or usable space for the residents, if it could be on that side where it could be accessible to,
Okay.
and through the easement process
Okay,
for the land that's there, if we can either get an easement, land donation, conveyance or something to get access to Mill Pond. It would be nice to have the town be able to utilize Mill Pond more than just something on a map.
What kind of access are you looking for? Just something that
Passive
would be,
recreation, it's
Okay.
not something you would drive a boat up to, it would
Okay.
be 2 people walking on a trail. If they wanna carry a canoe or a kayak, then that would be it.
I'm
But
just
right
thinking
now-
of sort of like creating that
A walking path.
access, like a walking path, I
Yeah,
believe.
I mean,
It
right
might
now,
be,
we have to go up to West Meadow and then go down the river or stream or whatever to get to Mill Pond. There's
Yeah, I'm
no
just
other
thinking
way.
about like future thoughts of getting that access, considering that we have the wetlands there, but I believe there might be an exemption for conservation access as long as it's less than 30 inches wide or
Yeah.
3
Right,
feet
I mean,
wide.
that's why I'm saying,
Or-
it's
yeah.
not a paved trail, it's not a,
Right.
you wanna
So we
walk
can
through
consider
a
that,
muddy
yeah.
trail to get your canoe or kayak on a mill
I'm
pond?
not
That's
gonna
on you.
kayak on it, or canoe on it. In the spring,
Right, I
in
mean,
the fall you can, but not the summertime, you can't even.
this
paddle.
summer you might have been able to.
Huh?
This summer, well, once you get through all the,
You can't, the milfoil, you get 5 pounds on the end of the paddle. It's really thick. And the geese are really doing a number on it. They eat it, and when you break off the top, it grows 5 shoots. I dug one out of it's down the river. It's invasive. It's down to the town river now. Went through the Flaggy Pond Meadow. It's terrible stuff, and you can't get rid of it. But I took a shoot out of the river, and I put it in a fish tank, and in 4 days, it went from a 2-inch beat up, right up to the top. 2 days later, it had come out of the water with little flowers on it. So 7 days, it grew this tall. You don't see it. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. Up north, they make you clean your boats and get stickers and everything because they just don't want it in ponds.
I got a question on those house lots. Every house lot is what size?
30,000?
30,000, that's everyone?
Oh, that'd be, I believe that's the minimum requirement, I would say.
right, there's some lots
Um,
that
Some are
are,
larger, yeah.
Some are larger, it looks like 30,000 minimum. Of course, like the lots that have the easements are
No,
far
even
greater,
some
but
of the other lots are, they're absolutely minimum of 30, but.
but like lot 12 was 102.
So
1,000
what's,
square feet plus.
what's an average house lot? I can't think of what,
The requirement's 30,000
30,000.
Yeah, that's
for a
what-
minimum
that's
size,
zoning
and it can be up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and like I said this, I think, and I did say that at the planning board meeting, each one of those house lots is 90%. It's gonna be 90% buildable.
Yeah.
In order to build on it. And each one of them is?
Yes, he's, whatever that formula is that he had to follow to do, he's met that criteria.
Even though like each house lot's different from the perk of the water table, different, I would
But it
assume.
doesn't change the size of the lot. It doesn't
No, I
change the
know,
lot.
I understand that, but
Well,
it
I know where you're going, and I will tell you that this is a question, and it's out to get an answer on, and hopefully the 53G is gonna come back with it.
okay.
But the definition by the planning board subdivision bylaw is and I'll read it right here, just so it's in the record. The horizontal area of a lot exclusive of any area in a street or recorded way, open or proposed to the public use. So that means any street layout, any sidewalks, doesn't count. The lots created subsequent to April 9th, 1979, at least 90% of the lot area required for zoning compliance, in other words, to be a buildable lot, shall be contiguous land other than that, underwater, including water courses, a bog, a swamp, a wet meadow, or marsh, defined by Section 40, Chapter 131, which is the Wetland Protection Act, and determined by a qualified botanist and confirmed by the Conservation Commission. So the debate that's come up is example lot 12. It's 102,221 square feet for the lot.
Yeah.
Which by definition, the lot area, 90% of that would have to be outside of any
Water vegetation.
area that would be covered by the Wetland Protection Act. There's an easement of 79,095 square feet, almost 80,000 square feet. So we're trying to figure out is that if it was 90% upland, it would have to have 91,999 square feet of upland area in it.
If you included the easement.
But the easement is part of the lot.
Yeah.
So the lot by definition is 102,221 square feet. That's the whole lot. 90% of that lot has to be upland.
Okay.
The way we think it's interpreted, we're having debate on that. So you take the easement out,
Yep.
okay, of that 102,000 lot. It leaves you with 23,126 square feet, which isn't a lot by definition in the town of West Bridgewater.
You're right.
So it's not a buildable lot if you get rid of the easement. So you keep the wetland, it's a buildable lot, but it defines, in their definition of a lot area, it doesn't meet the criteria.
Yep.
That's why that was in my letter to the planning board, wanting definition, because it kind of gives us direction of what we're going when we get into the individual lots and what's jurisdictional and what isn't.
Well, let's,
So that's-
give us the opportunity to,
Right, that's the only reason I wanted to, it doesn't affect quote unquote the subdivision that you're proposing, because we're looking at the roads, the stormwater crossings, the stormwater, the wetland crossings,
But
not
it
the
will-
individual lot.
It will later on down the.
yeah.
But
Right,
down the
we wanna
road, it
get
may
it right
affect
now.
what you get for lots.
Yeah,
No, we gotta get it
so we
on
wanna
that.
get it right now, and
Yeah.
And-
sounds like that's certainly something that would
But-
go through the
but-
review with planning
that-
board.
And that being said, I think our engineer has an answer for that.
Right, and that's why we're at that process now, where we're getting all the answers.
Yeah.
And, the only other thing I would, and this pertains nothing to what's happening with the individual lots, but just, I wanna make sure it goes back to the engineers to look at section 8 of the regulations of the stormwater. 'Cause depending on where the high water ground level is, it may affect the sloping and the filling and the grading of the individual lots and how much it has to go out.
Yep.
Because of the soils and the water table.
Yeah. and I
Section
think-
8 of the stormwater
Yes.
regulations, okay.
Did you have to do that on land post? Yeah, or was that?
No, that one was
So that
pre-stormwater
was pre,
regulations.
so this is new.
Yeah,
This is one of the things that we did put in for the
With the new
conservation
stormwater bylaws.
to help with the lot size.
New things that have happened stormwater wise to help neighbors and abutters not have runoff onto their lots.
We just did this, within the last.
And to try to avoid, and I will admit, Lamppost doesn't have the mounding in between lots. It's pretty much as you drive down that subdivision road, they all look at the same level. Yes, they grade off and slope in the back considerably, but the lots along the front, you're not having runoff problems from one onto the other.
Right, that was, we didn't
Yeah.
wanna create
And,
that.
and you did that before we had the regulations in
Yeah.
place to hopefully prevent that going forward.
Right.
Because that just makes for
We'll take a
dangerous
look at it,
problems.
we'll obviously take a look at it, because we don't wanna approve something.
Well, you have to
Can't
take a
go.
look at it now, because it's part of the thing now,
Yeah.
so.
And again, a lot of what I said was planning board purview. It really isn't something we have direct control over as a conservation commission.
Yep.
But it does affect the stormwater eventually, and individual lots, it may have an effect.
Yeah,
on
no,
lots.
we appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
Okay.
That's what I had.
Got a lot to write down, I think. Lot to find out. Anybody else got any more questions?
Yeah,
What do you say, no? Well, yeah.
Nope.
No, okay. So, just being that,
My question is going to be my recommendation for a continued hearing. I know you go back before the planning board on the 17th, I believe, of
Right.
January.
Yeah.
Do you want to meet with us on the 16th?
Sure.
Or do you want to,
Let's pencil that in and we'll request a continuance if for whatever reason we need some more time to
I'm
respond.
guessing, hopefully we'll have some review data back by then?
Well, I think you will, because especially where it's the same peer review.
Right, so we should be
He's- I
getting,
don't know
feedback.
this for a fact, but I think he's working on it now.
yeah, once it
So-
moves forward.
yeah,
So-
the next one after that would be February 6th, so.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And-
Let's try, like she said, let's try for the 16th.
Yeah.
We'll go from there.
But like the planning board said, it's a process.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a little while, it's not gonna finish overnight, but,
Right.
Well, this gives us a lot of good things to go get answers to. And at least knock these things out of the way, and then if we get the peer review list and knock that one out of the way, then go from there.
I have one little question. How was that lot, you call it lot 1 Stony Road?
Oh, yes, the sort of square shape in the top of the
Yeah,
property.
yeah. How did that get number 1, is it? Stony Road?
I think it's 0 Stony Road
Zero
on the
Stony Road.
assessors,
Does that
yeah.
mean that's the road it's on? What's the Stony Road got to do
This
with
is
it?
how the assessors map identifies it. It's nothing.
It could have
the
been like,
assessors take lots that don't have any road frontage. Or don't have an assigned street number, and they pick typically the closest street to that lot, and they'll assign it lot 0, and then it's map and parcel. So that's how you actually identify which lot it is. So if you look at the assessor database, there's a lot of them that say 0 Stony Road. There's probably 5 or 6. And then it's map and parcel to tell you which piece in their puzzle that actual lot is.
right.
And so a
Like
lot
this
of times
little
on hearings and
triangle is
public
0
notice-
Crescent Street.
Right, you'll see a bunch of zeros.
Like, after these houses are built, it'll never be the mail address of.
No,
No.
no, no.
Yeah.
No, because there's new streets, new street addresses.
And that's one of the confusing parts, and hopefully going forward, when the individual lots come up for permitting, we will actually have a house number and an address, street address. And it won't be just 0 Stony Road, lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, lot 4.
Yeah.
There'll be an actual street number, so we can track it and go forward with it.
Okay, all set. I'll entertain a motion to continue to January 16th.
Great.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, see you on the 16th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tim, do you mind if I email you, like, within the next couple
No,
of days
that's
with my
fine.
list of things to make sure I have it all?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Not a
Good
problem.
night, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next continuing one is 363 South Elm Street. What's up with that one? Still nothing?
All right, so the administrative side of our agenda, 363, no updates on that one. We're just waiting for engineering and application for permits to come in. I'll go through the list for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
17 Belmont Street, and an enforcement letter went out. There was a house that got torn down, and new septic system, new driveway, new yard,
Don't tell me they didn't.
total rebuild with no stormwater permits applied for or issued. 394 Matfield Street. It's got a very large area in front of the property being filled in. It looks to be almost 3/4 of an acre and growing. And again, land disturbance, stormwater bylaw, there's no permits issued or applied for.
On
So-
Matfield Street, huh?
Yes, it's a long driveway, sits way in the back towards Belmont, at that end of the street. That it looks like there's a
Sounds
gully
like-
and they're just filling in across it, but
Do something about.
there's a
Anybody seen
stormwater
anything,
permit
right?
needed, so we know where the water runoff and what the intent is. Maybe just all lawn, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of fill going in. And 482 East Center Street. Again, that one is, letter went out, enforcement for no failure to comply with any of the Wetland Protection Act, stormwater. 0 Sunset Street was cutting in a wetland, and it was a new property owner bought the land.
So that's the ones right after Trookings there, those 3 houses.
Yes. And then the Sunset lot is, cutting in a wetland. I've met with a gentleman, and he's looking to hire an engineer. He's not cutting anymore. He's gonna get a botanist to find out where the wetland line actually is and what he can do with it.
I think he would have done that in the beginning, but
And most of the trees he took down, I would say the majority of them were already dead or bleeding, or so
still.
it's not as bad as it could have been.
Sounds like replication.
And that is all I have.
All right, I'll just sign this document.
He's got a bunch of documents. Here's a pen.
And then, Steve, you got anything to say?
No.
No? Okay. All right.
While you're signing, I will let you all know that I hate to do it to you on January 2nd, but we have 2 new hearings, or notice of intents that night, along with a couple continued hearings. So
January 2nd,
don't party too much on the 1st.
Colin said. All right. So, nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion. Oh, yes.
Oh, sorry,
Before
go
we
ahead.
adjourn, we have some concerns.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name's Matt Jones, and
Marie Almeida.
we live at 64 Spring Street. I actually spoke to you by phone last week regarding the rising water levels on Spring Street. And my family has had property there since the 50s, and we have 3 adjoining parcels of land that have been having serious flooding issues for the past 5 years, and I'm concerned that there's issues where the current or the proper, like, normal drainage of the stormwater and groundwater has been interrupted that goes under Spring Street and to North Main Street. So I just wanted to come and just voice my concerns on record.
And I did follow up after your phone call, went out and looked, and I went as far as the stream crossing on the rail trail. And the water flow at that point and I checked every crossing up to Spring Street, and they had similar flow or almost identical flow, except for the Spring Street area, it's a narrower culvert, so there was a little less stream flow, but it was all moving and it was all flowing. The spot on 28 North Main Street, and then the spot on the rail trail was considerable flow moving through there. So I know that there's not a blockage or something considerably blocking it from there.
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to follow up with the highway department, but I am gonna make a recommendation that the inlet and outlet either side of all of those crossings, maybe they could clean them out a little bit to help the flow right there. It doesn't look like there are beavers or somebody damming up something somewhere and holding it back.
Okay.
Because things were moving.
All right.
I mean, I understand that the water is a greater issue, and if you look at what happened after this last rainstorm behind Spring Street School, I mean,
It's
I'm
left
sure
no room for error.
you've had more water
Yeah.
and more in the area. I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but unfortunately, Mother Nature's putting a lot more water everywhere, and I don't think that's going to get any less in the future. But if we can figure out how to maintain the stream flows that we've got.
It just seemed, it was very sudden, the change that happened. And you had trees that were 100 years old and they just were dead within a year or 2 years. And it's changed, like, so the water spreads. And I have the lowest property on the street, so where do you think it goes? So our intention, so I inherited this property from my grandparents that lived there since 1950, like I said. Our intentions were to rehabilitate the property. It means a lot to us to do that. But our concern is our house going to drown, essentially? Is it going to be swallowed by groundwater? Because in the summer, water, you can feel it like a sponge in my yard everywhere. The mower sinks in, you can't.
There's like a river going out in our yard.
All three of those homes have water intrusion in the basements. They've never had it before. So the groundwater is rising and it's putting pressure on all the foundations.
If you look at the Spring Street School, which you had your second ice rink, that if you want to go mow it, and the concern is too, like, I might not have children that go to the school, but there's kids outside playing there all the time. The mosquitoes are horrific.
Unbelievable.
And now you have
Clouds of
standing
them.
water
Clouds of mosquitoes.
all the time.
And it smells.
Football practice is happening out in that field all the time. So
Kids
you've got
playing
kids
recess,
playing out there. And I don't have children, but I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, if my kid went to that school, I'd have a huge concern, which is kind of a runoff from it's the same thing that's happened to the school. It's worse off in our own land. I get it, it's been a lot more rain, but something has changed very recently.
I'm not talking about just the rain we just had. This is
Right.
back 5 years now. This is.
If you also look at the vegetation in those wetlands on either side of Spring Street, and this is a natural occurrence, it's how Mother Nature deals with things, but a lot of the trees and plant life is dying at a greater rate. So all of a sudden you have all that plant material settling into that wetland, and it's basically making it spread out further because it doesn't have the volume.
And it's not using the water.
Right, the volume area that used to be held with water is now held with plant material that's dead. And in 20 years of all of the leaves piling up and all the grasses dying every year and just keep building up, it's making that spread out further. And you're, unfortunately, like you said, at the lowest property on that section, so you're gonna get more of the spread onto your property than anybody else is going to. It's a shame that it's doing what it's doing, but it's not stoppable, but if we can keep the flow as open as we can, it'll help.
So what would you attribute if you look at the map, the very definite end to where the dying off of the forest is? Like it's very clear if you look on the maps, the definition of it. Are you saying that's all natural? Like it just all of a sudden?
A good chunk of it is, and a good chunk of it I'm thinking is there has been more development in town in general, and so that water has to go somewhere. But if you look, and this predates me by years, but some of the wetland lines in that area and where the houses are built, to be honest, that last house in your family's property, probably today wouldn't be where it is because it's literally in the 50-foot no-touch disturbance zone, which means that wetland, it was really close to begin with to where that house was built. Depending on who did the delineation, as the young lady told us tonight, they have 3 criteria to look at. they used to only look at 2 of the 3. Hydrology and plant material. Soils were never really looked at until the last 5 to 10 years, even less than that. DEP now really says you have to do soil tests, you have to look at the soils. Because a lot of times the vegetation can lie and the hydrology can lie, but the soils basically can't. What's there for soils is soil that's there. And so if they did the delineation to build that house and just looked at vegetation, maybe hydrology, maybe not, a lot of times they just used vegetation and they would have said, oh no, this is more upland than wetland. And therefore, the house went in and the lot got developed. Nowadays, if they went and looked at the soils that were there pre-disturbed, they would have found that maybe that wetland line was 30 or 40 or 50 feet further, which meant the 50-foot no touch was even more. So,
The line has changed since, that house was built in 1985.
right, and so things have changed in it, but it's a combination of problems. I mean, and again, not so much development necessarily right nearby, but it could be 10, 12 houses away.
Oh, the brand new street that went up, not, like what? Like the one, are you saying, like, you're talking about our lot, or you're talking about a different lot?
No,
that being built?
The newest house lot that your relatives built on Spring, it's the.
76.
Yeah, 76. That's the one that today may not be exactly where it is. It may be further away from the woodland line or the wetland line.
Because the wetland line previously wasn't that close to where the
Right.
home is currently.
Right, or it wasn't enforced, or wasn't used, or wasn't identified of where it is. But looking at the mapping and looking at the plot plans and some of the permits that were issued and the plans in the office and we have, it looks like that wetland line was possibly in question on that lot. And the house you live in is so old and so grandfathered that, again, if they had done soils back when that house was built, it might not have been built. I know Mr. Griffin's house that was next door, that house probably would not have been allowed to be built today.
Yeah, they're in a little better shape because they're a little more elevated. Like
Right.
my foundation's low.
Yes, you've got the lowest one on the street.
Yeah. So I mean, my concern is what do we do? Like, do we have a future living in that property?
Tim,
You know,
what about like with those drains? You know, what about, can the town somehow put in bigger drains, or I get somehow an engineer, possibly whoever is
Well,
the new.
I think by cleaning out as many of those culverts as we can, keeping them open as wide as we can, and making sure the water's flowing will help at least move as much water through the system to where it's supposed to get.
I'd like to see it through the whole town. Hasn't been done over the last, I don't know how many years. Kept up with on the sides of the roads, the
Right, a lot of
ditches,
the
drainage
the
ditches.
basins and the drainage
They have just not been
system.
kept up, the town hasn't kept up on it. I would like to see them at least do it once a year, just go over.
there is a lot of debris and trash. There's
Yeah.
a road cone in
That
there.
would probably
Right, and I
take,
saw the road car, I have a
Yeah.
picture of it.
that would
Yeah.
take a
But I
lot.
just
That road cone has
Yeah.
been slowly getting, I think last summer we could see the whole entire road cone, and now it's like you
yeah,
just see
so
the
the water
top of
levels
it.
are not.
I mean, that would take a lot of water from a lot of places
Right.
down a lot, and it would help.
Right, just getting those culverts open so they can actually drain through.
That's just,
But I will say, I mean, it's definitely considerably less water flow the closer to your house you get through that system.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you could make sure it was open all the way through, that will help.
I don't know, I feel like since the high school,
Yeah, we're
everything,
just-
like, yeah.
I mean, if you were in our situation, what would you do with the property? Like,
At this point,
you know,
and I get it, like, I felt like it changed once the new high school was built, like, a lot of things changed, like, on that, the way.
There was some on the corner property, on the Peters property, some excavation that was done.
Mhm.
All of that is along the same timeline of
Yeah,
when these
everything
issues started
started.
happening,
Yeah,
like dead on. We've lived there for 16 years.
yeah,
It's my grandparents, and I was there since I was a little kid. Like, I know those woods, everything. I used to be able to jump across that stream, go through there. It's like, I kind of have a hard time like, believing that that's just natural, just all of a sudden like that.
yeah.
unfortunately, there are people in that will just come in and do stuff that, like, we've got a few enforcement orders that people have gone in and done stuff, and now all of a sudden they've got caught. But we're trying our best over the last few years to help.
But now it's affecting
Yep.
like,
Like you
Our
could have said,
property.
all right, here's your fine,
Yeah.
you shouldn't do this. You
but
know,
what happens now,
but
like the
They
consequences?
just get filled back in, they just push some dirt in there, and it changes the water paths and the structure.
So like, but now we're dealing with the consequences, like nobody, like the town is not dealing with the consequences, it's us dealing with the consequences of what has been done or not done, or
You
not
know, an
properly
issue that's
checked
not
on,
really on our property, you know?
so. But now it's our issue because the property, either the proper channels weren't followed, or somebody's not following up, and like, why is stuff not getting cleaned? Like, why has it been a couple years since things haven't been cleaned? Like, why is that not happening? Like, it seems like, I don't understand why that would not be happening. Like, it seems like we have enough staff. Like, I've never seen not enough staff. So like, why are things not happening? Because now it trickles down. So now, like, this didn't happen, so build it upon this, and then this didn't happen to build. And now we're in the state that we're like, okay, what do we do now because everything's flooding?
Oh, maybe we can see about, get the town.
I'll
first
follow
and
up with the
check.
highway department, and I think it's low hanging fruit on their priority list, it's not something that's up there and it gets put off and then they have something else happen and it gets put off again and again
But
and again.
it's
instead of-
a town
not-
issue because this is underground water and the high water table is spreading to the school property. So they're gonna have issues there if they don't already with like standing water.
Yeah.
So the
Like,
drainage is
Right, 'cause
very,
it wraps around
very
basically
poor.
Mhm.
from where your property is around
Yeah,
on
and that's a
Spring
low
Street.
lying as well, probably a little bit higher than ours.
And I get what you're saying, like, you know, that's probably the lowest thing on their totem pole because they got bigger things to do.
But it's still not right that it doesn't get done.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, okay, so now we're having a conversation about it. I know it's on record, but what is the conclusion to this conversation? Like, is it just gonna end here? Okay, they came, they made a statement, but like, what's the follow-up to it?
This might have to be one of the thing that they might have to keep following up on every year. Just be part of their thing now. I mean, I'd like to see it. I've said that a few years ago. I'm like, I don't understand why they don't keep up with cleaning out these ditches and keeping the water flowing, so.
Maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. It's not about the follow-up of them cleaning. I guess what I'm trying to understand is how do we know what the follow-up is to it? Like, how do we know, like, what steps are gonna be taken?
If any, I don't
Yeah, if
know.
any steps
Or
get
we're just out of
taken.
luck and it's
Or we're
too
kind
bad,
of like,
so
oh,
sad.
well, so bad, so sad. You figure out what you're gonna do.
I will contact the DPW myself, but I would also give them a call. And
We've done that.
okay,
Like, so. That's what I mean, like, we can call as many people and keep calling, but if nothing happens, like, where do we go from there? Like, where do we go from here? Like, if we continue, like, I could come here every meeting and continue saying something, but like, if nothing happens, like,
You know, just
what is,
talking,
like,
you know.
it's just talking. At the same point, we're still gonna be in the same situation, getting worse by the minute, you know?
Yeah, and then my property you can't sell becomes worthless because it's a pond, you know?
Well, let's talk to DPW and see what that answer is. We can certainly get back to you, on that
And
answer.
not that I want to throw something on the selectman's plate,
That's
but
fine, we'll get back.
last
to you.
resort, go to the selectman. And
I'll give you my contact information before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't want to do that because of your
That's
tears.
fine. I didn't want to
It's
step
not a
on,
selectman you're here, it's a town resident.
I didn't want to step on your toes either, so we're all
We
just trying to
wanna
play
stay,
nice.
this is our home, we wanna stay here.
I've been here forever,
Can't,
like, my
like-
family, like, has
They
been
own
here
a restaurant,
forever,
they own
like,
Daybreak Restaurant or
like, I've been here forever.
We don't
I'm like,
wanna
we
leave,
don't
you
wanna
know?
leave West Bridgewater, but we're at the point now that we have to either cut our losses and say,
We're
oh,
outta
well,
here,
we're
yeah.
out of here, we need to sell because we are at a point that we don't know what else to do. Like, literally, like, there's water running all day long.
Let's talk to DPW, let's see if they've cleaned them out recently or not, right? Because that could indicate a problem one way or the other. Especially if they've been cleaned out lately, then that might not be the issue. If they haven't, let's get them clean and see where it goes and, you know, not because of just your issues, but hopefully we're done with storms dumping 3 inches of rain on us Monday after Monday, and I mean, we've got the worst of it.
Yeah, but any storm, drive by Spring Street School.
It's,
Any storm, I mean, like, you get an inch of rain, anything, drive by the school, like, right where the kids, like, do their, practice for football, it's a lake. It's legit a lake, like, it just, like, you could go ice skating on there
and then
for.
it works its way into my backyard.
Mhm. And like during the summertime, it's like a breeding mosquito ground, so. But that's it. I never.
You had me at daybreak.
You had your daybreak?
Yes.
We're
What
all
does it
taking
take? I'll bring you
notes, so we will.
breakfast sandwiches. I'm like, what do you need? I give you.
Okay, so now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks,
Good
Steve.
night.
Have a Merry
Okay.
Christmas.
Yeah, have a good
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.